That the first question for the great Doc Pandaya, who joins us on Cleared to Play, special Thursday edition. I didn't know you did Thursdays, Doc. I thought this was the day you were having like pina coladas by the pool. So, but here you are.
Once a year.
Yeah. Hey, will we know immediately if it went to repair or reconstruction with Brock Purdy tomorrow?
I would assume, besides the obvious report that every surgery does that for a professional athlete, everything went great. I think they'll definitely probably say repair or reconstruction because, that's going to really determine the timeline, and it'll be very clear what they did. So unless the surgeon, for some reason, or the team doesn't want to say the details, which I couldn't think of a reason why, I think we'll know what the general timeline will be in terms of reevaluation and what they actually did during the surgery.
Let's assume it's a repair and hope for the best, and the timeline is 3 months until he can throw and 6 months till he can play. But what are the initial, immediate first steps if he comes out of the repair tomorrow and it's a successful surgery?
Yeah, I think the key thing, just like before, where they're concerned about inflammation leading to stiffness, afterwards, the first thing you want to do the first 6 weeks, besides pain control, is get the elbow moving, because these first 6 weeks are about preventing that stiffness. So even though patients are usually braced, you really start working on that motion, because that's really the opportunity where you can prevent stiffness, particularly with bending it fully and bending all the way back. So that first 6 weeks, you work on mobility, you work on getting the swelling down so you don't get stiffness that then prevents you from then moving on to strengthening and throwing. So initially, first couple of days, pain control, making sure he's okay, and you getting in and really hitting that rehab hard to get that mobility.
We're hanging with Doc Pandaya here. It is Cleared to Play. We take you inside the 10 every week, get you updated on the latest injuries in the Bay, and proud to partner with UCSF Health on this segment. And it is Associate Professor of Orthopedic Surgery, Dr. Brock Purdy. Hey, did you see the Kevin Durant injury last night, and what do you think?
I did, yeah. First of all, I just feel bad for him. He's, unlike Clay, he's had kind of this huge array of injuries after his Achilles, but everyone thought it looked like he slipped on the floor. When you kind of slow motion the video, it actually looks like he just literally just twisted his ankle, not even from a slip. So clearly when you see it, it looked like a pretty bad sprain on the slow motion video, but apparently he was working out afterwards and then got some swelling. So they're clearly getting an MRI. I think with his injury history, they're trying to just make sure there probably isn't a more larger ligament injury or maybe a high ankle sprain. But just based on the fact that they're being this cautious and sitting him down, I wouldn't be surprised if it's a couple weeks. You kind of feel bad for him, MCL, now this, and then potentially going into playoffs coming off an ankle. So I do think it'll be a couple weeks. It didn't look like a kind of a minor ankle tweak. And anytime you hear swelling developing after an injury, you get worried about it.
Yeah, just a freak accident in the pregame warm-up. You hate to see it, especially with the Suns coming to Chase Center for a big showdown with the Golden State Warriors. Will GP2 be able to be a part of the return at any time soon? What do you make of them still slow playing his return to play?
I think it's the right decision. I think his last game was February 8th, so he's kind of coming up to that 1 month kind of reevaluation time point. Assuming, let's say, like his adductor soreness, which is what they're kind of concerned about, is getting better, I wouldn't be surprised if you start seeing him doing some on-court work. And then typically the ramp-up period for that would be kind of 10 to 14 days. So could we potentially see him play a couple of regular season games if his pain is getting better? I think that would make sense so he can get some regular season activity in before going into the playoffs. But I wouldn't, this is the time at which they'll probably release something about a reevaluation, and hopefully he's progressing to being on the court. And that's really the key thing. I think if we see him on the court, I think he's pretty clear to then progress and play in the playoffs. If there's any bigger delay where they say, no, it's going to be another 2-3 weeks, then I get a little bit more concerned about how he's doing and where his standing would be for the playoffs.
Doc, what do your eyeballs tell you now watching Steph Curry for a couple of games?
He looks phenomenal. For an athlete who kind of has had this shoulder issue, this knee issue, foot issue last year, his ability to come back from injuries and get right back into a high level is pretty remarkable. Honestly, the fact that we're not even talking about his knee injury, game 2, game 3 back really speaks volumes about how he's doing. So he looks great. He doesn't look hesitant at all. He's moving great. Clearly his three-point shot has been affected. So all things point to this not being an issue for him for this injury that we really don't know much about and don't have much of a template to look back on. He's clearly exceeded it and has really taken a lot of worries, I think, out of a lot of us who are unclear about how he would respond.
Bit of a curveball. It was not Carlos Rodon won't be throwing a curveball, but his injury cropped up with forearm issues. And can this be a precursor to bigger issues with the UCL?
Absolutely, yeah, no, and it is something you definitely get concerned about because anytime there's any degree of overuse, there's something going on with mechanics, those forearm muscles start getting overworked. So a lot of times when we get pitchers who come in before they have a UCL and you'll say, look, did you have any symptoms? And they'll say, well, my forearm's been bothering me, my shoulder's been bothering me, my accuracy or velocity's gone down. So absolutely that can be a precursor to something mechanical going on. So that's why a lot of times they'll shut these people down, make sure that's taken care of to make sure that there aren't leading to that UCL. So absolutely, it's something you want to be very cautious with the pitcher, and absolutely, it can be a precursor to something going on with the UCL.
Okay, Doc, this is a big moment. I've been waiting for this. I've been waiting for this for months. This is it, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to my first San Francisco Giants question of the year. Let's go. Come on, Doc. Hey, tell me about Michael Conforto coming off of shoulder surgery. What should we expect? Are we at a spot where he can be full go by opening day?
Yeah, I think he's obviously had a very long time to rehab. And, obviously he's had issues with the shoulder on the other side. I think it was back in 2017. So he kind of knows the process. Clearly, I think the batting and the fielding shouldn't be an issue. I think there was still a little bit of concern in terms of throwing really hard and diving on the shoulder. And I don't think that's necessarily a structural issue. It's just he hasn't done it in a long time. So I think that particularly over this first half, these next several kind of preseason games, he should be looking good. He looks good in terms of the videos you see. So I don't think this should be a problem, particularly since he's dealt with shoulder issues before and kind of should know what he should feel like. So hopefully he's had enough time to rehab and he'll be back and contributing. I think there's an exciting piece of the puzzle for the Giants.
One more, Doc, and it's Austin Slater with elbow neuritis. Is that just nerve inflammation?
It is, yeah. And it's funny, we're all becoming kind of experts with ulnar nerve issues with Brock Purdy kind of having similar symptoms. I think when you have athletes who play baseball, you worry about the ulnar nerve, which is that, the funny bone nerve on the inside part of the elbow, and probably similar to what Brock Purdy was experiencing when he said he had tingling and pain. And the issue with that is that, number one, it causes discomfort. So it's very hard to throw effectively. And number two, it can also cause numbness, tingling, and weakness. So anytime you have a throwing athlete or an upper extremity athlete have that, then you basically want to shut everything down to make sure that it doesn't become more chronic. Because once it becomes chronic, then it can be a 3-4 month thing. If you nip it in the bud early, it can be like 1 or 2 weeks. So number one, I think that's a little bit more reassuring. And number two, the other thing you have to make sure is that the ulnar nerve is right near the UCL. So you also, just like with the forearm, want to make sure that if the nerve's getting irritated, there's not something else structural going on that's kind of lingering in the background. So better to shut things down, get a sense of where things stand, and then make sure it doesn't linger into the season.
Okay, Doc, we're going to let you go because your ramp up for next week has already started. It's kind of like being on Monday night in the NFL season. Like you need to be back on in 6 days.
Absolutely, and we know Draymond Green plays basketball tonight, Mark.
There it is.
Yeah, so does Dylan Brooks. Let's find out what happens. Okay, Doc, thank you.
All right, take care, guys.
All right, there.